This morning I took my cell phone, and I thought, oh, that's a good device, very helpful. I received a few messages, a phone call. I responded by texting, and then I realized that there is something in common between my cell phone and the solemnity that we celebrate today. We need, in a way, a tool or a mediation between us and other people. We need to have a tool to communicate, right? To call. If someone is very distant, but even if someone is close, maybe your neighbor, but you want to talk to him right away, you can't wait anymore, then you would take your cell phone and call the person. I have to admit that sometimes it's easier for me to call my friar who lives in my community in the same house, but it's easier to call him rather than go downstairs and upstairs. So the phone we use to communicate. And similarly, the saints are those who help us to communicate with God. Another example, if you get into bad argument, especially with someone who is not very close to you, maybe your friend, but not someone who you spend time on daily basis with, and then you want to reconcile with that person. You may want to find another third person, your mutual friend, who you will talk to first to find reconciliation. Or if a child offends a parent, wants to reconcile, and let's say that the child offended his or her father, he would go to mom and first ask, "Mom, could you talk on my behalf to the father?" So you see, in many situations, mediators are necessary because we need friends and we need someone to help us to communicate with someone else. And the saints help us to communicate with God. Because God, of course, is very close to us. Especially in Jesus Christ, He became Emmanuel, one among us, God with us. But at the same time, He lives in heaven, and as St. John says, no one has ever seen God. God is spirit. So, when we have saints who are similar to us, and we know a lot about some of them, especially those recent saints, we can easily associate with them, and we can easily get in touch with them because we find a lot in common with them. And we see also that many saints were not saints immediately. Many of them were sinners, then they converted, repented, and this is how they started their way to holiness. So we find our own stories in the lives of saints. There are so many of them, so different. Men and women, old and young, living hundreds and thousands of years ago, and also very recent, living in our century, in our lifetime. Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta or John Paul II. We met them, we saw them. And we can associate with them very easily because we understand that they are our friends. Everybody likes saints. And it's easier for us very often to talk to our saints and ask them for the intercession to God because we may be not feeling well enough to reach out to God, which is of course always possible. We can always pray directly to God. But our saints help us, they inspire us. One thing is that they help us to communicate with God. Another is that they give us an example how to live our lives. they motivate us, they inspire us to convert, to deeply commit. If you know the life of Mother Teresa of Calcutta, you may be inspired to do some works of charity. So many men and women were inspired to religious life and to the priesthood by John Paul II. So many people are inspired by St. Maximilian Kolbe. He's giving life for a fellow at the concentration camp. So those lives, those saints are put in, we could say, on a lampstand in the church to show us how we can fulfill our vocation. Look, there is a mother. Look, there is a father. Look, there is a priest. There is a deacon. There is a woman, a girl, an old man. So many different saints, and they show me that even if I am a sinner, even if I am far from God, I can convert by the grace of God and become a saint, even if I do it very late in my life. Because we also have saints who converted quite late. So, the example and the intercession, their mediation and their inspiration, both things are necessary. Now, in today's Gospel, we read about blessings. 8 of them. Jesus begins his preaching and teaching with the benedictions, with those blessings, 8 blessings. And this is the beginning of Jesus' public preaching according to Matthew. So why would he say at the very beginning that blessed, which means happy? In the Greek text we read makarioi, which stands for happy. Happy are those who are poor, who mourn, who are meek, who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Why would he say that those who are unhappy are actually happy? Because this is a paradox. Why would those who are mourning and poor, why are they happy? Because they are humble. Because God comes to help those who are unhappy, who miss something, who lack something. Because those who mourn, they look for help from God. They do not rely on their own powers and talents and connections, friends. They rely on God. And this is the key to holiness. If you look at our saints, you will see that all of them had their crosses. They had to carry their cross. They had moments of happiness, but they had a lot of suffering in their life. So Jesus tells us, if you are unhappy, if you carry your cross, you are in fact happy. In the eyes of God, you are happy because you look and you expect your salvation from heaven. You don't rely on yourself, but you look for help from heaven. And this is the beginning of holiness. When you look for a relationship with God, with Christ, then your life starts changing. And God comes with His grace and wants to change your life, wants to convert you and make you happy, not because of earthly success, prosperity, but because of your trust in Him. This is a completely different attitude. The saints have completely different attitude to suffering than people who do not believe. Those who do not believe, they curse suffering, whereas the saints make sense of suffering because they see that suffering is like cross. And cross takes you to Calvary, to death, but also to the resurrection. And this is how we, believers, look at suffering. Therefore, let us always trust in our saints. Do not hesitate to pray to them for their intercession, because they are given to us by the Church to be our examples but also to be our friends. We are not alone. We have community here on earth, but also in heaven. We believe in communion of saints, which means that those who are saved, the souls of the saved people in heaven, the saints, they look at us and they help us and they intercede for us. Let us trust in Him and have our saints, have our favorite saints. Do not hesitate to ask them to intercede for us and pray to them, because this is how we grow towards our own salvation, and that's the goal of our life.